I wish there was good news, but I don't think there's going to be good news for a while that is worth putting into my podcast. Because the news that I picked to put in here, by the way, is just stuff that I feel like that isn't being talked about enough, like the specific pieces that people are missing of the puzzle and everything. But anyways, my next story is related to COVID-19. So there is a New York Times article that exposed the real reason the United States is so unprepared for this crisis, specifically in the case of ventilators. Now, I do not recommend the New York Times as a news source at all. They are despicable in a lot of ways. But I believe this is a perfect story that really illustrates how capitalism is not functional and has a high human cost. Of course, the New York Times didn't mention that part. But, and real quick, before I read this part of the article I have here, I will explain what a ventilator is. And what they are is a machine that will basically breathe for you in case something like a disease is shutting down your ability to breathe, something like pneumonia. So basically a breathing machine. So for a severe case of respiratory illness, it is a life-saving piece of medical equipment, and COVID-19 often kills people through causing severe cases of respiratory illnesses. So they pretty much die from not being able to breathe. Hence why a breathing machine is able to save lots of lives, especially an abundance of them during a viral pandemic that causes respiratory illness diseases, which is coronaviruses, is a family of viruses that does that. So our government was very aware that ventilators were an essential piece of equipment for protecting people against a viral pandemic. And they were also aware that we did not possess anywhere near an adequate stockpile. So apparently, they made a plan to produce this stockpile, but our corrupted capitalist system ruined it. Here's some of the article, which is written by Nicholas Coolish, Sarah Cliff, and Jessica Silver Greenberg in the New York Times.
13 years ago, a group of U.S. public health officials came up with a plan to address what they regarded as one of the medical system's crucial vulnerabilities, a shortage of ventilators. The breathing assistance machines tended to be bulky, expensive, and limited in number. The plan was to build a large fleet of inexpensive, portable devices to deploy in a flu pandemic or another crisis. Money was budgeted, a federal contract was signed, work got underway. And then things suddenly veered off course. A multi-billion-dollar maker of medical devices bought the small California company that had been hired to design the new machines. The project, ultimately, produced 0 ventilators. That failure delayed the development of an affordable ventilator by at least half a decade, depriving hospitals, states, and the federal government of the ability to stock up. The federal government started over with another company in 2014 whose ventilators was approved only last year and whose products have not yet been delivered.
So the reason this company with the original contract was bought is because they were making better and cheaper ventilators, but this giant healthcare company already owned another ventilator company. So they bought their competition and canceled the contract. So they were too late. Capitalism was not going to allow public safety to affect profits. And make no mistake, the number of ventilators we have right now makes a massive difference in the death toll that we are going to see. And no one can argue that if we had a socialist system where private ownership of production did not exist, this problem would not have ever happened. One other piece of news I want to mention regarding the COVID-19 situation is the expected death toll numbers that came out of the White House. Trump is prepared for a death toll between 100,000 and 250,000 Americans. This is not even close to reality. With how our hospitals will become overburdened and with the infection numbers they're estimating, this estimated death toll really does not add up at all. I'm not a math genius, but I did a little bit of math, and I don't see how this is possible. It is likely going to be something like millions of Americans will die from this disease, and I made a point to mention this because mainstream news seems to simply be repeating clearly false numbers that are coming out of the White House, rather than fact check it. It really doesn't take a genius to see there's something off with these estimates. Yes, the reality is obscene and disturbing, but it is important that we stay in reality in order to adequately respond.